Howdy there, daylight burners. How the hell's it going? I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about today. I guess the other day, and couldn't really get my thoughts put together last night, so I decided just not to record. But I had a request the other day uh, from Dennis to talk about having a good boss or a bad boss and what that entails. And so I I figured I'd take that on tonight. So before I get into it too much farther, I got to tell you about my sponsor, Loma Livestock. They're owned and operated by my good buddy George Raftopoulos. They're in Loma, Colorado, located at 1369 12 and a half Road. And they got a sale going every Wednesday, cows and singles at 9 o'clock, followed by the feeders at 11. Give them a call to consign today, 970-858-9988, or check them out online at lomalivestock.com. All right, so talking shit on the boss man is what I'm calling this one. And so I've been the peon, lowest level pole guy, and then I've also been in charge of a crew of I think at one point I had about 10 people working below me. So um, I've been on both ends of it, and I try to think that I'm a pretty good boss. I don't know if you'd have to talk to somebody who worked for me, but um, anymore I just assume be my own boss, but that's not really the feasible at the moment. So that's why I need you guys to spread this shit out there so I can make some money and be my own boss. But um, that's kind of that's kind of where I'm at right now. I the the boss I have now treats me pretty well, and I tried to return the favor. So, um, but I've had some. I'm sure I've had some people that didn't like working for me, and I'm sure that I've got some fans out there as well. Um, but some of the my earliest bosses made I guess the most impression on me. I've talked about Homer Mundell before. Um, my buddy Clint's um, old man, one of the better cattlemen I've ever met, and I don't know if I'd say I liked working for Homer because he was a hard ass, but I respected him a lot, and he commanded respect. He just kind of took it. You didn't really have a choice. That was his show, and you did what he asked, and but he was fair about it. He was as I don't know if you ever remember the Wild Boys uh, spinoff of the Jackass series. Stern but fair. That was Homer Mandel, and I learned a lot from him. Like I said, he made one of the best impressions on me. Like I said, I don't know if anybody liked working for Homer because you had to work. I mean, I guess if you like hard work, uh, it it was pretty good. So I enjoyed working for him because well, me and Clint's always been good buddies, so that was a big part of it, and he was just a good guy to work for. And I've worked for some total jackasses as well, like some really incompetent people, and you know it's one of those things that you can see why like a lot of people just hate their life when you've got to go to a job working for somebody that you can't stand or you have no respect for. That's the biggest part is uh if I have no respect for them, that's I don't last much longer after that because it's just hard to take somebody seriously when you don't have any respect. So and luckily I haven't had a whole lot of those. I've been pretty fortunate throughout my life to have some pretty good people that I worked for. Going back to my younger days, another one was Terrell Hancock, whose son, my good buddy T, got married this fall, and I did some work for them, all throughout high school, off and on. And Terry was a really good guy to work for. He was kind of on the opposite end of Homer. He didn't get up when the sun was up. The sun was up and Homer hadn't done chores. That was a slow start for him. But Terry didn't get up with the sun. I don't think he still does. But you also, a lot of times, you worked a little later than most people. But he didn't have a problem waking up a little bit later, and you always knew when you saw his pickup coming down the road, um, you're gonna have a pretty good break because Terry likes to talk, and he will talk and talk and talk. And if you saw that pickup coming down the road, you knew you had probably a good hour where you didn't have to do anything. So that was a that was a good sign. Shut the fuck up, Robbie. And anyhow, I really enjoyed working for old Terrell. He paid me pretty well, and he didn't. We worked, but it wasn't the hardest labor I've ever had to do. Um, and then when I got into college, I had a bunch of different jobs there. Some legal, some not. But one of the guys that I worked for, Poison and Prairie Dogs, really paid me pretty well, and I think he started me out at $12 an hour, which for a college kid, I think when did I go to work for him, like 06 or 07. You know, that was pretty good money for a college kid, and I wasn't going to summer school, so I worked full time in the summer, and I made pretty damn good money. But I called the guy, Brett was his name, and supposed to talk to his dad on this show too. You guys get a kick out of him if we ever get that lined up. Um, but he told me what the job was, and he said, "Well, can you run a shovel?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've been running the shovel for a long time." And on the spectrum, uh, it's possible. I don't know. I've not been diagnosed with anything, so shut up. Uh, anyway, where was I going? Oh, Brett Boddicker. He told me what the job was, and said, "Can you run a shovel?" Basically, we're just poisoning prairie dogs, and I said, "Using the grain, Rosal grain, or so no, we've got a pellet that they use to clean out granaries and stuff, and that's what we do. But you gotta fill the holes back in." And, okay, yeah, I can do that. So he told me the pay, and I about shit myself. Well, yeah, I can start tomorrow. And so okay, meet me so and so at this place, and away we went. And he said, "Well, here's the thing: if you last 2 weeks, we'll give you a $2 raise." And I'm, well, shit, all right, that's no problem. And it was hard work. It just running the shovel. I guess it wasn't hard. It was tiresome, tedious. But boy, he paid us good. Like I think by the time I left there, I was making 17 or $18 an hour. He always gave us a good Christmas bonus. Give us a daily bonus depending on how many prairie dog holes we poisoned. And he also liked to live vicariously through me and my buddy Brad. Aaron worked for us one summer too. So we can talk shit on Aaron all we want, but he did work his ass off that one summer. Found out he really hates snakes. But he liked to live vicariously through us. So Tuesday night was college night at the Sundance, so of course we'd always get tuned up there. Uh, Incredibly cheap drinks, and we'd show up Wednesday morning just reeking of early times bourbon and probably vomit and who knows what else. It was Wednesday mornings were rough, and Brett was he was pretty cool with it. He didn't mind waiting a little bit, and as long as we had some good stories to tell, which we usually did, and he kind of relived his college days through us. So he was a really cool boss. His dad, who originally started the company, was also really cool. They treated me well, but I tried to work hard for them. So those are good bosses to have when they know what they got. They're kind of upfront with you on the job. They just he said, yeah, it's just if you can run a shovel and you can do it for 8 to 10 hours a day, sometimes 12. Um, if you can do that, then you'll fit in here. That's it is what it is, and so that was there was no sugarcoating it, and but he was always really really nice. Every time we had to go work overnight jobs, it was he'd take us out to dinner, and it was always order what you want, and he pretty well made sure that you ordered steak. Uh, and he was really cool, and I always remember those types. Last time I talked to Major, his dad, who, like I said, I'll get him on the show. He is a really neat fella. But I end up talking to him for about an hour every time I do call him. I only call him once every couple of years, it seems like, but we end up talking for like an hour, like we left off just yesterday. He's just a super super cool guy. Um, so that was I worked for them for 2.5 years, I think, through college. I worked in the summer and the spring, poisoning prairie dogs, and then in the fall when the outside work slowed down. Major made he invented a coyote call called the critter call, and he had the wherever he had them manufactured the different pieces, but then he had assembled them himself, and he paid me a quarter a piece to put prairie dogs calls together or coyote calls together, and he had one you can make sound like a prairie dog, but um, just put coyote calls together, and so I just sat at home, watched college football, and drank beer, and I could put them together fast enough that I'd make about $20 an hour. I think is what I got to where I could put them together quite at a pretty good rate. You can't post Rain Man gifs. That would be funny. Uh, Now, so the Boddicker family and the Mandel family, Hancock family, those are kind of the three main ones that really stick out as good bosses for me. Like uh, the guy I'm working for now, I'd say he's up there as well. But as far as past bosses, those families, the Hancocks, the Boddickers, and the Mandels, they really treated me well, made a pretty big impression on my career going forward, and they're just the type of people that'll do anything for you, uh, but they also expect a fair day's work. So it was a good trade off there. When I left college, I worked for my dad for a little bit, and he's an awful boss. He's a real hard ass. But he hooked me up with a pretty good gig poisoning prairie dogs right after I graduated. Before I moved up to Montana, I made pretty good money in a short amount of time. Um, and then I moved up to Montana, and yeah, I wasn't high on the bosses there. The foreman I worked for directly was a pretty good guy. He was a very devout Mormon fellow from Idaho, um, and he married a Mormon gal from Great Falls, Montana, and he was good. He was just a couple years older than me, um, So it was kind of like his first big job as a ranch manager type, and that it was a it was a corporate type ranch. They still cowboyed, but it was corporately owned, or they had a board of directors and whatnot. It was kind of a that was my first foray into the kind of the corporate agriculture type deal, and it was a weird kind of feel to it. I'd been around plenty of ranches before and worked on and off for several of them, and but they were always family owned, family ran. uh, you're funny. You're funny, you jackass, dance monkey. But that the way they ran things up there, it was they had like weekly safety meetings or something, and even if it was just me and the ranch foreman, because they had five different locations, and so each location had a manager there, and so when I got moved to the spot that I on Cow Island Trail was the name of that road. It's a county road, but Cow Island Trail, as I got moved up there, and it was just me and the branch foreman there with his wife. She helped us here and there, but for the most part, she just kind of kept the house. And but then they'd have like a conference call every morning between the different branches, and it was so it was a weird mix of just old cowboy and corporate, and it was just kind of a weird feel about the whole deal. Uh it was a weird run outfit in general. The way they ran their bulls, the way they ran their help, they seem to never be short on somebody new. There was always somebody coming in and out of there, but there were always new people coming in. But there was always people quitting, and and it was just it was a weird vibe about that whole place, and I was pretty far from home. My mom wasn't doing so good, and it was just it didn't wasn't meant to be. So I didn't last up there. I don't have a whole lot bad to say about the bosses. I don't have a whole lot good to say. I was just kind of yeah. I don't think they liked me a whole lot. I didn't particularly like them a whole lot. There wasn't anything they particularly did that treated me wrong. It just we didn't get along, and there's no harm in that. Just yeah, nobody's making you be there. So if you don't like it, move on. That's well, you're on a roll tonight, Robbie. Uh, no, I'm just going extra gray on that one side there, Blake. I'm not going bald, just gray. Um, anyhow, there was, I don't know how they recruited help there. I guess part of it they offered internships through. I know they had some sort of partnership with CSU, but they had people from like junior colleges, and oh, they had a gal from like North Carolina or somewhere, and they had a gal that was from Illinois but was getting ready to go to vet school in Ireland, and then they had a guy that was headed to K State for vet school, and so they must have had a pretty good recruiter network, um, to find them help. But that sounds like they really catered to those going into large animal veterinary, um, because they could get a lot of experience for them, and on in turn that ranch could get a lot of cheap help. They I think the interns made $700 a month room and board, and and then like I talked about it before, but they didn't run any different bulls on their heifers than they would their range cows, and so their assist rate was 55%, um, and it was up on the High Line. Montana started calving the end of March, middle of March to end of March. So it was still dropping down to the negative teens every night. Plus, you had the wind coming off the bear paws, so they any one of those heifers that dropped a bag or anything uh, got brought into the barn. They calved them inside. It was just too damn cold to calve them all outside. At least the heifers, and then the cows started a little bit later. Um, but it was just, but they could have ran things way more efficiently. It seems like, but I think I think the family sold it to some corporate outfit that basically bought it as a tax write off, and then they let the family continue to run it how they wanted to, and then they it just I don't know, it was a weird setup. Hadn't Not like anything I've ever been around before or since, really. So the way they had some of the safety practices, but the way they were not concerned at all on like minimizing the labor load throughout calving season, which is that's kind of typical. It's why you have calving these low birth weight bulls, and you know they make all these tools to make your job easier, because you're you're in the middle of the busiest time of year. So anything you can do to make your job easier, you think you'd do, especially on a big outfit like that, where they ran about 3,000 mama cows. They're land wise, they covered 100 and 130,000 acres. It was a big place. uh and you'd think you'd try to minimize that labor as much as you can on your calving side, but I don't know. I didn't understand how that was run, but the more I think about it, I think it was probably more of a tax shelter or a tax write off than anything else. Um, because it was just a weird way they ran it. But then from there I went to riding colts, and I guess Doc would you could say he was my boss, but that was just really day work. Uh, and he didn't it didn't feel like a employer employee relationship. It felt more like a neighbor helping out type of deal. So I never have really considered Doc the boss man, but I guess you could say it was his place, his horses, all that. So um, I guess you could say he was the boss man, and he treated me pretty good. He didn't like to work too extra hard, so uh, therefore I wasn't expected to work too extra hard either. So it worked out pretty good. He always bought Mexican food for lunch. Made sure that we had plenty of iced tea to drink on the porch when it got hot, and it was the Arkansas Valley in the late May, early June, so it was getting pretty warm at that point. But that I think that deal lasted about 2 weeks, 2 3 weeks, something like that, before I started in the feedlot, and then I took a huge leap into corporate agriculture, and uh, Five Rivers Feeding, who owned Grant County Feeders at the time, had just been bought by JBS. So I was there just right after they made the official transition from Five Rivers to JBS Five Rivers, and they were rolling out a new feedlot software program that was developed in house. There's a so you didn't have a contractor coming in working on it. It was all in house, and they decided to use their biggest feed yard at the time. or with the highest head count to be the guinea pigs and work out all the bugs. And at the time, they were they were working on breaking their previous head count record, and we ended up doing it was 126,500 and something. I can't remember the exact head count, but there's a lot of fucking cows. And in the meantime, we were running about 1,100 head a day through the processing barn, uh, 6 days a week, just trying to. I think they'd run Monday through Friday. They'd run about 1,100 head, and then they'd run 7 or 8 on Saturdays, and then take Sunday off. So processing a lot of cattle, uh, doctoring a lot of cattle, being in the summers when they rolled this whole deal out right in the middle of summer. And then you had the Flint Hills Run cattle coming out of eastern Kansas off the tall grass prairie, and and they're rolling out this new software program with bugs all over the place. We had a load of Holstein steers coming from west slope of Colorado, loaded in the snake in the tub at the processing barn, and they were all EID that we had to scan, and this thing was supposed to work, and we go scan the first animal, and it just froze the computer. Like you had to hold the power button down for 5 seconds to get it to shut off. I mean, it Control Alt Delete didn't work. Nothing worked. And every time we tried that 3 more times, and the way they had it set up, if you wanted to restart it, you had to restart it at the main computer, and so you had the feed side running off of it, you had the doctor crew running off of it, and then you'd have to reset the whole system. And we tried that 3 different times, and called the IT lady, and she's like, well, can you give us like a day or so to get that worked out? Well, no. We got cattle standing, in the facilities, got one in the chute ready to go. And yeah, the computer didn't work. So we ended up having to write EIDs down by hand. And the corporate world was a clusterfuck. Boy, that's they preached a really big game about developing talent and creating a good culture to work for it, but at the same time there's so much liability involved there, and I'm sure because of frivolous lawsuits throughout the years, but you got the company trying to cover their ass at every turn, and then there's a lot of inner office politics, and who it was weird. They'd hire somebody especially on the hospital crew, and it seemed like within a week or two they were trying to find a reason to fire them. But now the way they had it set up, you had to be wrote up 3 different times before you could fire them. So then they were just constantly watching these people like a hawk, trying to find a way to write them up and get 3 strikes on them so you could fire them. And it was another really weird scenario to work in. I mean, it was strange, and it kind of burnt me out on the corporate, at least the bigger corporate world, pretty hard there for a while. I still kind of got just a bad taste in my mouth from JBS, but apparently I wasn't the only one. The folks that were running it, uh, the JBS US side of things, they just got convicted of corruption charges in Brazil. So when they divested in from the feeding side in the U.S., I wonder how many politicians in D.C. were kind of getting a little nervous on that deal. Um, kind of kind of some shady shit that went down uh, on the JBS thing. So I don't know what all went on behind the scenes, but it was a pretty big shakeup here. It was about 2 summers ago, I think. Um, but I've worked in a spot there where there was several JBS yards right there close, and so I knew a lot of people that were kind of bounced in and out of those yards, and and the way the overbearing like safety regulations were when I was there, were it was bad enough, and they just got worse and worse over the years. It seemed like every time there was an accident, you'd have to put in a new policy to counteract that from ever happening again. And I think it got to the point where, like they only had a certain list of approved bits you could hang in your horse's mouth and a certain type of cinches. And it was really, it seemed like just a awful place to work for if you were any sort of hand at all. I mean, but I guess, paycheck's a paycheck. If I've been in that spot before. You don't want to go work there, but you gotta pay your bills somehow. So they were always short-handed, but they always had people working there, and they're Grant County and Colorado Beef, both they're both about an hour away from where I ended up in Kansas, and they were always hiring, but they always had some of the same people that'd been there forever working there. So I don't know. There you had seemed like there was no in between. They'd either been there for 20 plus years or less than 6 months, and I don't know how they are to work for now, but I can imagine they're still big corporate outfits. So I imagine that a lot of the safety regulations are put in place. I guess the benefit of not being owned by a packing company is you might have more feedlot related safety policies as opposed to packing plant related policies. And that's where I guess a lot of the struggle with the bosses comes in is a lot of it has to do with safety policies. And if you're a manager of those yards, you're representing the company as a whole. So you want to try to look out for the guys working for you, but the guys working for you ain't cutting you a check. So you gotta keep the higher ups happy. And so it's once you hit the management side of things, you're no longer one of the guys. You're the boss man, and things get weird because you have to. There's certain stuff that you have to enforce, but it's also stuff that those same guys that are looking at you now, uh, they've seen you've seen you just breeze over those rules before. So uh, you know you it's kind of just you know you have to kind of play your cards right from day one. But if you're the squeaky clean guy from day one, then you're still not one of the boys. So it's kind of a tough spot to be in. So you have to, I guess, you kind of have to play tough when you need to keep the bosses happy, but also turn a blind eye when you can to keep the guys happy. And it's I don't know, it's a fine line to play, and I don't know how good I am at doing that. So I anymore I'm cow boss at this outfit, and that's about as high as I want to go. Any higher than that, there's a lot of extra headache. Probably a pretty significantly bigger paycheck, but whether it's worth uh, the extra headache, probably not. So I'm at the point now where I make good enough money. The boss man treats me pretty good, and I don't have to work too awful hard. I can still spend time with my kids. They're still pretty young, so I like spending as much time with them as I can because they grow up in a hurry. And so I've got a pretty good balance of that. Uh, but I'm aware how well I'm treated here too. So I know if there's cattle coming in at the dead of night, I better be ready to go unload because if not, somebody else will. So keep the keep the boss man happy so I can keep a cushy life. But I I don't know if that answers your question at all, Dennis. I didn't really provide you with an answer, but um, I guess a good boss is they're hard to come by because boss is a tough spot to be in. You want your guys to work well for you, and you want to treat them right, but at the same time you gotta watch numbers. You gotta try to make as much money as you can, and that sometimes that means pissing off your help, and so you gotta find a balance and how to do that. And there's a few people that I've worked for. I've had you know the fortune to work for, and then I've had some. How I guess I ought to tell you about this. The job I moved out to Nevada for. I I found this deal online because I was working for the K State Research Farm, and I was kind of a farmer, but I was more of a gardener, I guess. They had about 300 acres of farm ground, which is nothing in western Kansas, but it was all broke down into like football field sized plots, and it was all research stuff, and it was miserable. I hated it. Um, so started looking, and there was feedlot jobs everywhere, but um, most of the places I'd either worked for or knew people that worked there and hated it, and they weren't paying a whole lot anyhow. And anyway, I started looking out west and found this deal. It was running a wild horse feedlot, Mustang feral horse feedlot for the. It was owned privately, uh, but of course the horses all there were BLM horses. They had BLM wranglers that took care of all the processing and stuff. And then this guy that owned the place, he got paid to feed them and make sure the fences and waters and everything was in good shape. Make sure that that everything was there for you know keep those horses alive. And because you can't slaughter them now, it's illegal because feelings or whatever. Um, but you can't have too many of them out on these grazing allotments because they just wreck the vegetation. So they round them up. Um, they'll adopt out some of them, but I don't think they'll adopt out anything over the age of 6. They don't adopt out anything that's got a foal at her side. Um, so you end up with a whole bunch of mares and a whole bunch of older horses that they can't sell for slaughter. They don't adopt them out because of their policies, and they've already rounded them up, and they're not going to turn them back out on the desert. So you the taxpayers, me as well, you pay for them to be fed in a feedlot. One of them outside of Fallon, Nevada. There's several of them, but yeah, it was kind of a weird deal. But the guy was paying me a buttload of money to come run this thing, and I said okay, because I know a lot about the feedlot business. I don't know anything about feeding horses in a feedlot. So it's easy. You'll pick it up. So all right, well it's going to be a pretty sharp learning curve. He also had some really high dollar registered Angus cattle that he ran there as well, and it sounded like my main focus was to be the horse lot, uh, and then to help out with the cattle as needed. So that's how I took it. So I would kind of glance over at the cows for the first couple of days, and then I was told I needed to spend more time on the cattle. Okay, and then he's I don't know. It just is flip flop back and forth, and then a week later it said you're not running this thing. So I told you I needed a little bit. I needed a learning curve here. So give me a few weeks to get my bearings, figure out what the hell you want me to do. And anyway, I worked there right at a month, and I got demoted at 2 weeks, and then finally he said, "Well, we're not gonna be able to keep you on as a manager. We can keep you on as just a laborer." And I said, "I think I'll take my chances elsewhere." So I called over here to where I'm at now, and that's where I've been. But that's how I got started in Nevada. I was a wild horse wrangler for about a month, and then I went back to feeding cows, which is what I've done for the bulk of my adult career. So I'm pretty decent at it, and it's treated me pretty well. I've met a lot of good folks from it. Had some good experiences and some bad experiences. I've learned a lot, and I've learned a little bit about what I want to do with my life. And in the meantime, I've got a pretty sweet gig here, so I'm gonna try to keep that going swimmingly until I can make enough money out doing my own thing, and then I don't have to answer to shit except for my wife, and I can usually just ask for forgiveness on that one. So knock on wood. Anyhow, I think that's where I'm gonna end it. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit. Go check me out on well Facebook. You're probably watching it on Facebook. Two of you are, and the whole spiel at Movie Your Ass on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Burning Daylight page. Go check out the website burning-daylight.com, and we're gonna do another live stream tomorrow. We're gonna talk horse wrecks with a couple listeners. Got Kane Boswell coming back on the show. Dennis is coming on to tell one of his, and then hopefully Haley Bendystraw will be on to talk about roping a turkey. It ought to be a good one. Tune in. Be right around 7:30 Pacific time. So on that note, adios. Move your ass. We're burning daylight.